And speaking of serious problems that the left has deliberately cultivated at the expense of everyone, on Monday, a Texas man who was very, very active in the fringe furry culture was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for transporting a minor across state lines to a furry convention in Georgia, where he, unsurprisingly, sexually abused this child. And no doubt we're supposed to pretend that we're shocked and surprised by this, when in actual fact we all know that there is a disproportionate representation of pedos inside of kink communities. That doesn't mean that every person involved in kinky stuff takes it all the way to raping a child, but it does mean that the people that are into perverted stuff in the first place are way more likely to be perverts that are involved in kinky stuff related to kids. We all know this. We have known it for all of human history. And I'm not going to pretend anymore that we don't actually know the things that we already know. Something that we will circle back around to in a moment. As for this pedo, 37-year-old Joseph Robertson pled guilty to taking this minor out of Frisco, Texas, and transporting them all the way to Atlanta, Georgia for this kinky furry convention. And yes, it was kinky. We will get into that in a moment. Now he's been sentenced, and after he serves 20 years in prison for what he did, he will be on parole for the rest of his life as a sex offender. So let's circle back around to the things that we all know, but nobody's willing to say. I would point out that in many ways, this particular kink culture of furries seems to be geared by design towards children. The people who engage in it create elaborate cartoon animal personas. They're not just animal personas. They are cartoonized, childized. They don't dress up like an actual dog, like your pit bull. No, they dress up like Blue's Clues. They wear elaborate costumes that often seem to be designed to be enticing to children. In fact, many of the people who participate in this culture are children because that's who they're recruiting. And some furry conventions also include adult-oriented vendors, to put it mildly, which is obviously going to attract a very specific type of adult. Robinson had commissioned a red and white full-body animal costume for the very convention that he took this kidnapped child to, according to the reports from NBC Dallas-Fort Worth. The Justice Department stated, while at the convention, Robinson sexually abused the child by engaging in acts that would constitute child molestation and sodomy under Georgia state law. Additionally, Robinson purchased sexual stimulants and devices at the convention. That would be the part I said we would circle back around to. And, he's talking about at the convention here, commissioned artwork depicting his furry persona engaged in sex acts with the minor victim. And apparently the artist was just like, okie dokie. You know, if this was just one bad apple, which some people are going to try to claim, then why did none of this raise any red flags for all of the other adult good apples at the convention? We all know the answers to these questions. And I am not willing to turn a blind eye to what we all know this fringe group actually is. And by turning a blind eye, allow kids to be abused just because most people in our culture won't come out and call the people in the Barney costumes plus bondage gear what we all know they are: pedos. The U.S. Attorney, Jay Combs, also rightly labeled Robinson's conduct as depraved, saying, "Most children's experiences with people in costumes as animals comes in the context of fun encounters at theme parks." Right. This defendant turned a furry costume into a nightmare of sexual abuse. He also pointed out that given the very adult nature of this particular furry convention, where bondage gear and sexual stimulants were being sold along with sexual artwork, it was disturbing that any child was present in that kind of atmosphere, saying it shocks the conscience that a child was allowed into a convention where adults were dressed up as furry animals and sex devices were being sold. Not one person in that convention contacted the authorities to protect the child. Every child deserves security, dignity, and a community that stands fiercely in their defense. Protecting children is one of our most solemn responsibilities, and we will act ferociously against anyone who threatens their safety. But once again, no one is surprised that not even a single one of these adult furry pervs who saw this child being hauled around this place tried to protect the child. Not one. Like I said, we all know why. And I am not going to pretend otherwise anymore in the name of tolerance. Because tolerance of this is coming at the expense of kids. So the adults are just going to have to cope with whatever they have to cope with and keep their kink in their bedrooms and away from kids on the streets. You know, we were told for years, stay out of our bedrooms. I agree with that. Keep your bedrooms in your bedrooms. Quit bringing them out onto the streets and quit coming after kids, or you are going to face the same consequences as everybody else. I'm not going to pretend that this shit is not what it is anymore. No. It should be noted that this case was prosecuted as a part of the Justice Department's Project Safe Childhood initiative, which targets the growing exploitation and abuse of children by deviants. And yes, anyone who sexually abuses a child is a deviant. I don't care if it's not a nice name, it's an accurate name, and I will call those people, the ones who sexually abuse children, what they are. I will not mask the awful things they do behind polite language. And because I have freedom of speech, you can't do a damn thing about it.